thanks for coming along to Lockdown CocoaHeads. I'm Jarrod, and I'm here to give you a high-level overview of the big things announced at WWDC, as well as throw in a cool few bits and pieces that I've gleaned over the last couple of days since the conference began. I'm sure many more things will be uncovered as the conference continues, and I recommend checking out some of the videos getting uploaded daily to get better insight into what Apple's releasing this year. And this year, to me, definitely feels like a snow leopard year in that it's one that's really focused on improving and refining rather than big evolutionary changes. But I'm not sure we can really blame them after the year that we've all had. It's been pretty intense for most of us. But I actually think this is a good thing because by all reports, iOS 15 Beta 1 in particular is a fairly solid release so far. Apple engineers appear to have had time to get things into a solid shape this year. And that's where I'm going to start today, iOS 15 and the biggest highlights of it. Well, actually, it's not just iOS 15. This year, more than ever, we have a bunch of features that cross-cut Apple's entire set of operating systems. And like many people over the last year, Apple...
Hang on a sec. Sorry, Jarrod, we've lost audio. I lost video for some reason. Can you reshare your screen? Oh, no, never mind. I found it. It's changed. Okay, cool. Please continue. Yep.
Okay. Hopefully you can all see my screen again. Like many people over the last year, Apple's employees have obviously been spending a lot of time getting used to remote working, as well as using apps like Zoom to coordinate meetings. Well, this year, Apple's decided to beef up FaceTime to include a lot of improvements. The first of which is FaceTime links. Now you can send a link to anyone to join a FaceTime call, which is pretty ideal for calendar invites. There's also portrait mode, which is maybe not quite as cool as snap camera filters, but at least you can get the nice bokeh filter to blur out your background. There's also spatial audio, where individual voices now sound like they're coming from the direction in which the person is on the screen. And there's voice isolation, which this is really cool, actually. Now, if someone is vacuuming behind you, the noise from that will be filtered out entirely and you'll come right through clearly. But one of the bigger features that they're adding is SharePlay. So now, while you're on a FaceTime call, you can watch movies and TV shows together with friends with synced playback controls and automatic volume adjustment when people speak. But this also goes beyond video. You can share music, currently through Apple Music. However, it's nice. This year there's a FaceTime API, so I suspect other services like Spotify will also offer integration soon. So it's great to see Apple open up some of this stuff, considering they did make a promise a long time ago that FaceTime would be open sourced. Not quite there yet, but at least we're getting something. Surprisingly, Apple's also added screen sharing, which is perfect for showing your parents where the Wi-Fi setting is on their phone, which is something I have to do a lot. And this is really surprising. FaceTime comes to Android. Well, browsers anyway, not quite native Android anyway. Maybe an app will arrive in future, but for now, Android users are stuck with a website. Now, moving on, another big feature this year is focus and notification improvements. Now, Do Not Disturb is a pretty great feature, but it is pretty heavy-handed. Apple's now providing a way to bucket particular apps so they don't disturb you with push notifications while you're in a particular focus. So, for example, you might only want to allow notifications from Mail and Slack while you're at work and leave noisy chat groups from friends until the end of the day. Third-party apps are also able to integrate with this feature and are able to break through a user's focus with important notifications if needed. This year, we also have more control over the importance of notifications, or telling the system the importance of them. For example, those which are time-sensitive and require a user's attention immediately. These are treated slightly differently by the system. Time-sensitive notifications, for example, will stick around on a lock screen until a user acknowledges it. Thankfully, the critical alert, which plays a sound even when your phone is muted, requires an approved entitlement, so bad app citizens won't be able to blast the user with it. One of the really cool features I thought this year was actually in live text. There's always a bunch of photos improvements every year, but live text is by far the coolest, I think. It's basically OCR. It's able to look for written text in photos and allow you to pull it out and perform actions on it, from copy and paste to calling phone numbers. Also available is a translate feature, which is pretty impressive and definitely something that could be useful if the vaccine rollout ever finishes and we're able to go on holiday again. This works on not just text, but even works on objects. So basically, we finally have hot dog, not hot dog in iOS that actually works. As has been the case in recent years, Apple continued to make a big push about user privacy. A few weeks ago, Apple finally added app tracking transparency that requires developers to ask for access to the user's advertising identifier, which greatly upset Mark Zuckerberg because it makes it harder for Facebook to track users across apps. And you can see why. These are some metrics from Flurry, which shows only 4% of users allowed sneaky apps to track users across their apps. I had expected Apple to poke Facebook a little bit more with iOS 15, but they got off relatively lightly this time around. Well, almost. There was a little addition to the app review guidelines, which says that any app that supports account creation must also support account deletion. But actually, the Apple critic who's likely most upset with iOS 15 right now is a guy called DHH, or his initials anyway, the co-founder of Basecamp and Ruby on Rails. And he's upset, well, likely to be upset, because he runs a new app called Hey, which is a privacy-focused email service that aims to prevent user tracking and data mining. Apple clearly had a good look at his app, maybe because they saw it from all the tweets he was sending them, and have made some big updates to Mail this year. Basically, Mail will do a lot of the same stuff that Hey does, blocking tracking cookies and your location. So pretty good stuff. I personally haven't used Mail for a number of years, and I think this will definitely get me to switch back. Another really cool feature is Privacy Report, which lets us view how often apps access permissions like location and camera. Something really fascinating is the ability to see which URL endpoints an app hits. Now it'll be really easy to see which apps are bad privacy citizens who send data to lots of analytics companies. There's also iCloud Plus, a new paid service. You're now able to create essentially disposable email addresses for signing up to websites with, which will forward to your real email address. There's also iCloud Relay, which is basically Apple's own VPN to hide where you go on the web. This will be added to existing iCloud plans at no additional cost, which is nice. Siri's also had a bunch of improvements, and we now finally have on-device speech recognition. Siri can perform many tasks without going on the internet, and this makes Siri significantly faster, and this benefit was shown by making the Translate app super speedy. And I'm kind of surprised this one took so long, but Siri is now being opened up to third-party apps on HomePod, which is great for users who have apps that aren't made by Apple, which I imagine will be just about everyone. Maybe Spotify will finally get full Siri access on HomePod. That would be nice. I mean, I don't actually own a HomePod, but I imagine people who have one would want that. But one of the best bits of iOS 15 is that it runs on all the same devices that support 14, which coincidentally are the same devices that run 13. It's great news as we want our users to upgrade, and we don't need to support older operating system versions longer than we need to. So all of these improvements mentioned are also unsurprisingly coming to iPad, but the iPad is getting a few specific features of its own. Now you can go straight into split view from the app switcher by dragging an app over another. There's also a really cool feature where you can write a quick note by dragging an Apple Pencil from the corner of your screen without having to switch to the Notes app. But many of the big ticket iPad items this year are some of the big ticket items from iPhone last year. So now we have widgets and the app library on iPad, just like the iPhone last year. The app library now lives in the dock, and there's a new larger format for widgets, which I guess is cool. Xcode for iPad. This is basically a meme now. Every year someone says Xcode for iPad's coming out. It's coming out this year. Now it kind of is, almost. Well, it's actually a Swift Playgrounds update. And basically, they're extending that app to let you do a lot of the same things that Xcode does. You can now develop a full app and deploy it to the App Store straight from Swift Playgrounds. So now, for the first time, your apps can get rejected by Apple directly from the iPad. This looks pretty cool, and I expect will become much more fully featured as time goes by. This does beg the question, should the app be called Swift Playgrounds if it offers more than just playgrounds? Perhaps not, but I'm not in Apple marketing. So this year, macOS is Monterey. It boasts many of the same features in iOS 15, like SharePlay, Focus, and the privacy features, but easily the coolest feature it does have is a feature called Universal Control. You can use a single keyboard and mouse or trackpad to control your Macs and iPads together. You can even drag and drop between them. It's unclear exactly which devices will support this or whether it'll be tied to the new M1 devices, but it's definitely a very cool feature. Shortcuts is also finally coming to Mac, one of those big ticket items from a few years ago, finally making it to Mac, which I guess makes sense, but it does make Automator look like the odd one out. Apple says it'll be a multi-year transition. I suspect that means it'll be like Dashboard and that it'll be around for years after people finally stop using it. You can import Automator workflows into Shortcuts. I personally love Automator, but I suppose this one was really only a matter of time. Now, unfortunately, I just saw this morning that a lot of these really cool features in Monterey are actually limited to the new M1 Macs, very annoyingly. They won't work on Intel, you'll have to upgrade. This is because the new devices have the neural engine, which is allegedly used for some of these complex tasks. I didn't know some of these complex tasks included showing a 3D globe of the Earth, but anyway, that's up to an Apple engineer, I suppose. Unfortunately, this also includes portrait mode in FaceTime, live text, and a few other bits and pieces. And finally, one that's probably very interesting to a lot of developers here, Buddy Build finally shows up in some form. Xcode Cloud is Apple's new continuous integration and delivery service that is entirely accessible from within Xcode. The aim is to make Xcode the central location. There's no need to use another Git client to push your work, no need to go to another website to create a pull request or leave Xcode to deploy. It's all within Xcode. It does what you'd expect in a CI/CD system: push your code to a repo, run tests on it in parallel, which is a nice addition, and distribute it to testers. You can run workflows across multiple OS versions and Xcode releases. There's built-in integration with hosting providers like GitHub, as well as Slack for alerts. At the moment, it looks pretty simple, but time will tell how much customization is available and whether it'll be worth our time to move. I'm definitely very interested to play with this one. And as part of this, TestFlight is finally coming to the Mac, many, many years late, but it's now here, or will be very shortly. If you want to join the waitlist to get access to Xcode Cloud, that is available at the link now. It's free during the beta, with pricing to be announced later this year. Hopefully it's decently priced. We shall see. Another really interesting feature is it relates to AR. You might say, oh no, AR. Apple loves talking about AR. I wish they'd stop. I mean, it's cool, but I mean, many of us don't have much to do with it. But at least it's not the same tabletop demo that they often do. This feature is called Object Capture. Object Capture lets you take a series of 2D images using an object, or 2D images of an object, using your iPhone or iPad, and use the new Object Capture API to create a 3D object from them. Amazingly, you can create a 3D object from these images using this tiny, tiny, tiny amount of code. That's very cool. I honestly think this is totally insane because I've attempted to use 3D modeling programs in the past, and it is not easy. I can definitely see a lot of applications for this technology, particularly things, like IKEA furniture. That would be pretty cool to just be able to scan a chair and, see it in your house. So that's all for the consumer stuff. Let's talk about a few interesting developer-focused things that I've picked up. The one that I'm very most excited about from this perspective is Async Await. And why this is exciting is because it lets you delete a lot of boilerplate code. And the less code you have, the better, because that's where all the bugs are. Every iOS developer has likely written something like this before. It's callback hell. What's it doing? Causing a mess mostly. And what if you could get rid of this crap and write code in order, have it wait, but without blocking the thread you're on? That's essentially Async Await. It lets you write asynchronous code without all the boilerplate that's cleaner, shorter, and less likely to result in you forgetting to call a callback somewhere. And this also makes writing tests for asynchronous code trivial, so an excuse for us to write more tests. There is one thing, however, that does suck about Async Await, and that's that it's not backwards compatible. So if you want it, you need to be running iOS 15. So basically, we can't use it for a year or two, most likely. Apparently, it's something that's really hard to backport. They are looking into doing it, but it's not looking too hopeful going by the post on Swift on the Swift forums that I read. Fingers crossed, with enough pressure, they might add it to a later beta, but at this stage, we're out of luck. Now I just want to cover a few smaller highlights. And the big one is Apple is now eating more of their own dog food. Apple have rewritten the weather app, and it's got some really gorgeous weather effects. It's now entirely written in SwiftUI, or allegedly anyway. Now Apple can experience all the bugs too, and hopefully fix them for everyone. New in SwiftUI this year, it's mostly a bunch of small additions, things that arguably maybe should have been there earlier, but at least they're here now. There's new modifiers to add in search bars, pull to refresh, and swipe actions on list rows. Also new is Async Image, which is great because that's one more third-party library that you can all delete. And surprisingly, there's also Markdown support in text objects as well as NS attributed string, which is pretty cool. I used to work with a guy who loved Markdown, so this would make him and all the other web devs really happy. macOS is also getting some love this year. It's now got a table that you can create using SwiftUI. And I just want to cover one last thing in UIKit. I'm sure there are many, many other things, but this is a real standout for me because I've been waiting for a long time. And Apple's been teasing me with it in their Maps app. It's a partial sheet, and we only just wrote our own custom version of this, so it's only natural that Apple decided to add it this year. I'm not sure if there's a SwiftUI modifier for it yet, but at least it's there in UIKit, so with some bashing we can get it in. And that's it. Apologies to the Apple Watch fans. It got cut from this talk. You did get some new watch faces though. I'm sure there's much more that Apple announced, but I hope that gives you enough of an overview of some of the cool things announced at WWDC. Thanks.